Hi everyone, this is Darshan Senthil, and in this video I'm going to be talking about memorizing the unit circle. And the only things that you need to memorize in the unit circle are the angles that you already know, okay? And these are the angles that we get from our special right triangles, which are 90, 60, 45, and 0. So if you just know these angles and all their measures, then you should be fine. But then you also need to tessellate them across over here and over here and over here. Because a circle has 360 degrees, we can measure angles up to that and beyond actually. So again, this may look really onerous and tedious, but I'm going to tell you a few pointers here that I use myself while studying pre-calc, so that you can use to make this memorization process much easier. I learned these tips from my teacher, and I just made up some of these myself. So I'm just gonna teach them to you, so hopefully they can help you memorize the unit circle. Okay, so let's get started. So first up, the thing you need to consider are base angles. Okay, so what I mean by this is, if you look over here, okay, all these angles, you see a lot of angles here, right? A lot of angles, yeah. But the thing is, all of these angles, okay, all angles on the unit circle, all angles on the unit circle are derived from the base angles. And what this means is that they will have the same trig functions. Okay, keep that in mind. So I'm going to tell you what those base angles are momentarily. And actually, yeah, the base angles are these. So you've got 0, pi over 2. Oh, whoops, I should put these in order. So pi over, not pi over 2, but pi over 6. And as you can imagine, we have pi over 4 after that. I'm putting these in ascending order. Pi over 3 and pi over 2. So these are basically all the angles that you need to know the trig functions for. And if you know that, you should be fine. The other things will just follow because their trig functions will be the same. You just need to memorize the trig functions for these angles. Sorry about that. Alright, so let's just go over the trig functions for these. Okay, so pi over 6, 0, I'm going to put them in a little table here. Okay, I don't run out of space. So let's just make another column here. So let's see, so sine and cosine. These are the only two things that you'll need to memorize exactly on the unit circle. So and this is basically the y coordinate, and this is basically the x coordinate. Okay, so for 0, because 0 is, if you just think about it, 0 is to the far right, so it doesn't actually move up, but it moves right, and it moves right 1 unit. So its coordinate is 0. Wait, it's 1, 0, my bad. So its y coordinate, because it doesn't move up, is 0. X coordinate is 1. Okay, for pi over 6, which is, and by the way, you can always think of these in degrees, but it's important to recognize their radian forms as well. Okay, I'm just going to list out the degrees here just so you aren't overwhelmed. Okay, so these are basically your degree measures, and these are the radians. The radians are what you will see more often, but you can always visualize them as degrees. Okay, so pi over 6, we know its y coordinate is 1/2, and its x is 3 over 2. And now let's go straight to pi over 3. If we use our law, our two laws that we got in a previous video, If we use these, then we know that the sine of theta, or the y coordinate of pi over 6, is going to equal the x coordinate of pi over 3, or the cosine. So that's going to be 1/2 and root 3 over 2. Okay. Now let's put to pi over 4. Pi over 4 is very easy. It's just root 2 over 2 over root 2 over 2. And 90, which is pi over 2, is up over here. So in contrast to 0, it moves up 1, but does not really move right or left. So it moves up 1 unit, so we could say that it's 1, 0. Okay. So if you know this, you're in pretty good shape for knowing the other ones. Now the second major pointer I want to make is, which angle does it correspond to? Which angle does it correspond to? Okay. So you may have like an angle like 3 pi over 2, and you could know all this stuff, but you won't know which trig functions to use because you don't know which angle it corresponds with. Okay, because you can know the base angles and but you won't be able to link these two. So I'm going to show you how to link the base angles with random angles. So the first thing you should do is look at the denominator. Okay, look at the denominator. So if the denominator is 6, corresponds to pi over 6. Okay, if it's 3, corresponds to pi over 3. If it's over 4, then it corresponds to pi over 4. And if it's over 2, corresponds to 3 pi over 2. And if it's just over 1, then it corresponds to just 0. Okay, so that is something you should know. So just look at the denominator, and that'll tell you the trig functions. So if we just know these two things, if you just memorize these angles, and you know just look at the denominator and know which of these to link it to, you suddenly already know the trig functions of every one of these angles. And what did that take, like 2 minutes? You suddenly know all of this. Okay, but there's just one last step that you need to know. I'm gonna do it up here, okay, because I'm weird. Quadrants. Okay, what's the sign of the function? And I don't mean sine, but the sign, as in plus or minus. Okay, so what's the sign of it? And now is when you need to know your quadrants. And what I like to do is I like to visualize this on the graph. So I'm gonna teach you what are called reference points you can use, and that's not referee, by the way, it's reference, which you can use to determine which quadrant it's in. Okay, so consider the graph like this, the unit circle like this in graph form. So over here you have 0, over here you have pi over 2, over here you have pi, and down here you have 3 pi over 2, which again is you can get just by looking over here. That's pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 0. Okay, you can just get that from here. So if it's over here, x is positive, y is positive. Okay, if it's over here, x is negative, y is positive. It's down here, x is negative, y is negative. It's down here, x is positive, but y is negative. Okay, and you already know that x is equal to cosine and y is equal to sine. Okay, so now that you know this, You just need to visualize where your angle is. So if angle is less than pi over 2, then it's over here. Or I'm just going to write these on the graph right here, okay? So 0 to pi, everything from 0 to pi over 2 comes in this domain, or in this quadrant. And then everything from pi over 2, I should do this in a different color, what do you think? Pink. So everything from 0 to pi over 2 falls over here. Everything from pi over 2 to, pi falls over here. Everything from pi to 3 pi over 2 falls over here. And everything from 3 pi over 2 to 0, and this is basically the same thing as 2 pi, or 0, 1 second. Comes over here, okay? So again, I made a whole video on quadrants as to why that is, and you should know that as well. And now all you have to do is visualize. So for example, if your angle is 5 pi over 6, okay, then think about it. So first, the first thing, which base angle does it correspond with? Because the denominator is 6, this is going to be pi over 6, okay? So we know automatically that its coordinates are going to be root 3 over 2 and 1/2, okay? So now we just think about the quadrant. 5 pi over 6, how does that compare to pi over 2? Then now at this times like this, just don't look at the pi. Just hide the pi and just compare the fractions. So how does 5 over 6 compare to, well, I should probably not put the, how does 5 over 6 compare to 1 over 2? Well, 5 over 6 is much greater than 1 over 2, right? So it's not over here. But how is 5 over 6 compared to 1? It's less, right? So we know that it's going to be in here. And because of that, the x coordinate is going to be negative. So that is going to be it. So that is how you find the trig functions of any given, of how you memorize the trig functions of all the angles on the unit circle. And I hope that was helpful.